I'm just going to totally lose my ability to speak German because I noticed that in the first part, everybody, even though I was told that everybody's going to speak German, everybody felt obliged to say that he used English as a main education school too, so I'm going to follow that good tradition and speak English now. And it's my pleasure to announce the presentations, which go into much further depth now. Let's start with the first presentation, The Tyranny of Pedagogies, Changing Mindsets to Achieve Sustainable Development Goals. The presentation will, as far as I understood, stress the necessity of letting go paternalism and focus more on dialogue in work whilst communicating sustainable development goals. Please welcome the director of the UNESCO Mahatma Gandhi Institute of New Delhi. He's from Malaysia, Anantha Duraiappah. Welcome.
It's interesting, I was given an identity of a Malaysian. My youngest child always asks a question, why? And so she sort of said, you know, Papa, you're no Malaysian because you have never lived in a country more than 5 years since you were born. So I like to call myself as a global citizen. And in a sense, basically having multiple identities, and this will be part of the talk that I give to you today. Let me start off by, and it's a tough act to follow when somebody just sang, and then now I have to talk. I thought I'll start with a tap and dance, but then maybe not. How many of you have heard of the SDGs? Not many. I told myself if I don't get many hands, then I'm going to just pack and go home. But then I think Benno will ask for a refund. So I'm not going to do that. So let me sort of tell you a little bit about, so that's 17 goals that and you can see it's a colorful set. And you have heard many presentations earlier on. They've talked about challenges, the scientific community. Well, there's 17 of them for you to take on for the remaining 15 years, because this is the target year of 2030, quite ambitious. But if you look at those goals, they basically cover nearly everything that we are facing now as a humanity in terms of problems. The big thing is, and I thought it was unique, it was endorsed by the 193 member states. That's not an easy feat. When you get 193 countries, this was over 2 to 3 years, basically a lot of grassroots negotiations right from the bottom up. And the interesting thing is that they are universal in nature. What do I mean by that? This basically sort of says that these goals are relevant for every country. It is no more this set of goals for the developing countries, and then you got this aid kind of mentality instead of we are going to help these countries achieve the goals. No, everybody has to achieve these goals because they're all in the same boat. And that's a really fundamental change in the mindset. And I'll talk a little bit about mindsets pretty soon, but this was a fundamental change in mindsets. It's universality in terms of these SDGs. And so the next question is, are we achieving the SDGs? And I just like to be a bit provocative always in my presentation, and so I'm going to start off by saying a big fat no. And the good thing is when you work for an institute which is related to UNESCO, you don't have to do the politically right thing and say yes, because we are supposed to be the kind of intellectual support for UNESCO, so they allow me this little bit of liberation that I can do these things. So I said no, and I'm really convinced that it's going to be a no, and I'll say why. And the first reason is wrong mindsets. Now, in this presentation, I've made two fundamental mistakes myself, which go against what I'm trying to say today to you today. And I'd like you to point out these two fundamental mistakes, or I contradicted myself on what I'm trying to get across today. So the first reason is wrong mindsets. And the mindsets, in a sense of, what do I mean by mindsets? So how do we perceive problems? understanding multiple perspectives, the whole notion of agreeing to disagree, appreciating not just tolerating diverse values. Now, these are important things in a sense that how do we perceive problems? An example is poverty. Like you saw goal number 1, everybody says, hey, that's a simple one. And the first thing that comes in mind is $1 a day, as long as we ensure that everybody gets above the poverty line, they're fine. But you know, when you go down to the ones who are defined as poverty-stricken, their definition of poverty is very different. A very seminal study, one of the few done by the bank. I'm not a fan of the bank, but this one, they did it well and they did it correctly, where Voices of the Poor, and they actually found that the poor do not really consider income as a priority. It's right down at the bottom of their list. The top one was esteem, self-esteem. They want to be recognized as a person. And that was an important thing. And so we've got SDG 1 wrong right from the start. Again, so these are the way we perceive problems are important. And the reason I say we got it wrong was that it was created by mindsets that I consider created these problems in the first place. And that's why they see it as that's the problem that we have to solve. Well, that's not the problem. It's a much broader problem. Understanding multiple perspectives. How do we see now there's a huge increase in what we call violent extremism? All the things we have seen in Paris, Bamako, Lahore, India, Mumbai, is just going on a regular basis. And trying to understand why this happens is more important than just trying to react to it. Why are these young people willing to blow themselves up for a cause? There must be a reason. Why? And trying to understand those multiple perspectives, and that's what I call the dialogic process. Then agreeing to disagree, and in a peaceful way. We will not always have consensus. We will not always agree on things, but let's be willing to disagree, and in a peaceful way. And then the last one is just appreciating and not toleration. Now, when you see a lot of the UN documents, we talk about tolerance. I think that's the wrong term. Tolerance is just you're tolerating. So if you have a single thing that triggers it, boom, it just moves off. It's about appreciating it and respecting it. That's what we were looking for. So this is an interesting thing that I looked at. This is Google, that really nice thing up on the web where you can do a lot of things with it. And if you type, so this came out on why Jews or why Muslims or why Hindus are. And then what it finished was the algorithms running behind Google searched and sort of put together what others are searching under that particular topic. And it's interesting, for Hindus, Christians, Jews, atheists, and Muslims, mean, bad, and wrong all come out. This is a really sad state of affairs. This is how a majority of people who are searching Google or looking into these, this is from a religious perspective, it's all negative. We need to change that into something positive, right? So these are really strong challenges. These are real challenges for the International Global Year of Understanding. Did I get that right? International Year? Yeah, I got it right. So, and this was done in 2012. It changes. People's values changes. So it's interesting and I throw this challenge to Benno, is that get this on and see whether it changes over this year and see if you have made a difference or not, even if it's a small, minuscule way. And it's quite easy with Google. So the big question is, how do we change mindsets? We brainwash our children in a friendly way, and I'll tell you how that friendly way is. We're doing it on a daily basis. Then, of course, media and advertisement, you have that continuous hitting you every morning. One of the things I do every morning is watch CNN just to get my blood all riled up, heated up. When I watch Quest for Business and he keeps on harping on GDP, 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 and knowing that the fact that the person who developed GDP said, do not use GDP to evaluate progress. And then this guy continuously every morning says, this country is doing bad because his GDP has not increased. This guy is doing bad, so question your leadership. What options do you give to the leadership other than just focusing on GDP? And that contradicts everything that you here as a community focus on, sustainability. You just can't. Ask the scientists here, they'll tell you that. And then of course fear. The way that what's happening right now with the extremism through fear. That's not the right way to change mindsets. And so I sort of say, how about education? Yes and no. And the key question is, what type of education? And if you see SDG 4, which is on education, it says access to and quality education. Now, what is the quality education is the important one. And right now, it is literacy and numeracy is what is quality education. And that's not enough. I'm not saying it's not important. We all need to do 1 + 1 = 2. We all need to know how to read and write. But that's not sufficient. And so this is the current education system that we have. You know, if you look at the whole list, teachers, directors, teachers, a knowledge source. Now, this is something that you're very familiar with. This is the system that I grew up with. I really thought it sucked. And I think a lot of the children these days think the same. I had some real nice pictures of kids in classrooms, but I thought I won't just push it there. How many of you have heard of Pink Floyd's Hole in the Wall? All right, I got a few more hands there. And that was my favorite song when I was in school. And one of the things that I didn't put in this is that this school system, and Paulo Freire, the educator from Brazil, one of the big names in education, I say that this produces a very predatory mindset of our children because it's competitive based. The first thing when they get their marks is not how did I do, how did the other person do, so to know that whether I did well or not. Rather than saying, did I do well based on what I have put in terms of my work. Yeah. So it's a very fundamental change in the way we evaluate ourselves. And so the outcome is self-optimization, self-righteousness. We all sort of say that we are always right. I'm always doing that. Right and wrong. It's either right or wrong. There's no such thing as the fuzzy gray area. Economic rationality is running rampant. How many of you have read the book Predictably Irrational? This lights, I can't see that. I got somebody there. And I'll talk about in a sense that most of us do not act as economic rational agents. And most of the economics is based on the assumption that we are rational agents. So that explains to you why we are having all the problems in the markets, because they don't work according to what the theory says. And then you got self-interest and a narrow worldview. So this is what we produce from the education system we have now, what Paulo Freire calls the banking system. It's just about putting in information, bang, bang, bang. It's not about analyzing it, critically thinking about that information. It's just about just soaking up as much information. And I'm not sure whether you have this in Germany, but in the system that I came up, we just memorize, and then we have an exercise. It's a really nice game called spotting. So you try to spot the type of exam questions that the teacher is going to put. So that itself is a whole industry by itself. And so the mindsets to achieve the SDGs, things of collective optimization. I still use the word optimization because we do live on a world with scarce resources. That we know. Multiple perspectives, so that we understand different ideologies and respect different ideologies. I like this third one called self-doubt and cognitive dissonance. The whole notion that you self-doubt yourself in terms of what your values are, what your beliefs are. Are they the right ones? You're continuously questioning that. And it is a healthy state when you have cognitive dissonance where you're contradicting yourselves continuously. And that's healthy. A lot of times they were saying that's a bad state to be in and that you need to clear and have one objective. That's where the problem is. We don't live in a very simple linear world that we have. It's a very complex world that we have, and we have to appreciate the dissonance. And then social irrationality is what I call the stuff that predictably irrational, the chap that Dan Ariely is the one that works on. They're mostly psychologists. I think they make a better economist than people like myself. I was trained as an economist, and I never understood people's behavior. So go figure how dangerous that is. And then the whole notion of a global worldview, which is what this IYGU is going on, and then the planetary well-being, and not just your particular little village or your particular national country, because you're linked, you're connected. And so education in the knowledge area, and this is the stuff that we are thinking. There are few schools doing this, but I would say 90% are still in the information, in the industrial age. We're just slightly moving towards this education in the knowledge age. And you can sort of see that it's a lot more. I'm the first one I was noticing who's taking a drink while talking. I was just wondering what happens with all that water. So, in a sense, these are the things that we want to create and give our children to have, on a daily basis. And what I didn't put there is it should be fun. Education should be fun. You should enjoy going to school other than just playing soccer, but it should be fun in going to a subject, in studying that particular discipline. But is this enough? Many would say yes. I still say no, because I'm a fussy little fellow, I want more. So the second reason is we cannot stop there, and I sort of say the humanistic age, we call the cube model. So the whole notion of consciousness raising, that's important. Things of empathy, intercultural understanding, the intercultural dialogue. Empathy is extremely important. Feeling for others, not out of just charity, but as a sense of a right, a human right. We know it's not foreign. We have all this already in the system. But internalizing that into the education. Critical reflection. I like Rawls' second theorem. I'm not sure how many of you know John Rawls, but what this second theorem sort of says is, it's called the max-min principle, is to have this understanding that if you don't know in which position you're going to be in the future, what will you do in the present? And most people will sort of say, well, I want to make sure that everything is there such that if I become a pauper, I have all the social security benefits that I have, or if I become unemployed. So that's the kind of mind experiments that you used to play with. So the counterfactual inquiry base is a critical element for our educational systems, right from the very start, right from the time that they walk out of their cradles into school. Is what we are trying to push this. And then convictional. We're convinced for a behavioral change. This is important. So these are the three. And this is something that I thought would be good. This is basically about us versus them. And if you see different from us, same as us, and a bad and worthless, good and valuable, play this game in terms for any of the issues that you have. Maybe the one that is now migration, which is happening right in front of our eyes. Try to sort of put into which area, whether they are the same as us, and then if you have the same as us, what you would want to do, or different from us, acknowledge that they're different from us, and then whether they're bad and worthless or good and bad. And sort of see the education systems that we would like to. So, a little bit about MGIP. I was told that I have to do it, otherwise they won't pay for even the little things that I have to, like laundry and stuff, so I have to do this a little bit. So we have these magazines that we bring out every 6 months for a bit. Because of the demand, we're going on a quarter basis. We tend to be provocative. So the first one is Global Citizenship, the War in Our Minds. And the last one was What Does It Take to Change the World? And the one which is coming out in June is about what we have right now that's going on in terms of the violent extremism and some education in crisis is what it's called. We really believe in the youth. I have given up on my generation, even myself, because I made mistakes even while I'm developing this presentation, and I've given up on the generation above me. So the youth is where we have to have There are about 3 billion of them, if you take up to the age of 34. Well, let's say if you think that they are already too old, you still have 2 billion from the age of 15 to 24. That's a huge number, 2 billion. So we spend a lot of time on the youth in terms of being our agents of change. And as I said, I like education to be fun. I always played games, so we develop a lot of games for learning. Sometimes violent games, like the ones that most kids like to enjoy playing, where they shoot everybody else, and if you kill as many as you can, you raise your profile. Well, we use that, but we use reverse psychology because we get educational psychologists to help us develop those games, where we use the reverse psychology in a sense that you have to survive in a day of a war and the others are shooting at you, you have no guns, you have to survive that. And you kind of understand what a hard day it is to survive in a day of a war when you're in a war zone. And many kids are really, and so the idea here is as you learn, the learning principles are already ingrained into that. And then we have this TAG 2016. What's TAG? Talking Across Generations. We bring in about 500 youths. We bring in about 10, 15 experts. We don't introduce anybody. There's no podium. Everybody's on the same level. They sit all over the place. And then they have a really open dialogue between them. And then only at the end, we will introduce who the people were there. And in this way, we kind of get the young people not to be inhibited. They really say what they want to. And we had a former president of Kyrgyzstan, and they were like shocked to have said that, you know, what she said was really silly and stupid. But they didn't know that she was that. And so it was interesting to see that dialogue. And this is the Knowledge Commons. It's like a Facebook kind of an approach, which anybody can come on, form a community, and have a dialogue. And that kind of tells you what are the most trending topics around the world, what's really being talked about, what are the main issues, from which part of the world that's coming up. So it's kind of a little Google. And if you want to join, that's the one that you want to join, Knowledge Commons. Thank you very much.